So today I'm going to talk about focus, why we lose it, how we get it back, and how we sustain it. So why do we lose focus and concentration? Well, actually, losing focus is part of the natural process. It's part of our evolutionary system, and it's meant to keep us safe. Because if we were always focusing and always using all that energy on focusing, we'd get tired very quickly. We'd suffer from eye strain, ear strain, headaches, brain strain, fatigue, and blood pressure, because we're constantly running on adrenaline when we're focusing. So our bodies actually naturally allow us to have a bit of a mind wander or a bit of a calm down. So losing focus is actually a natural process. And we have to watch ourselves, though, that we don't keep going and keep going and keep focusing. We need to take time out. So, for example, you will know that, especially in the UK, but I'm sure in all the countries around the world, truck drivers have to, by law, take breaks when they're driving so they don't lose concentration later when they're actually on the road. So for example, they have to take 11 hours of a continuous break in a 24-hour period to make sure they're well rested so they can focus on the road. Many truck drivers drive early in the morning, for example, when conditions are not particularly good. So we have a law in the UK to stop people losing their focus. It's the same with athletes as well. If you imagine you're an athlete and you're constantly using your muscles all the time and you're constantly keeping your heart rate up, that's not good for you. And I'm sure Dean would agree with me in his post on Wellness Wednesdays about we need these natural breaks to rest and recover. And it's the same with our mind. It's the same with our mind about focus. Some people like to say the focus muscle, because basically what you do, you have to build your focus ability up over time and then take rest. So that's a really good analogy about the focus muscle. So what are the advantages of taking breaks to improve your focus? Well, the first one for me is it's about having breaks. It allows you to retain the information in your brain and allows you to give you some processing time. It's said that our brain has two functioning modes, and one is the focus mode and one is the diffuse mode. So if you imagine a sort of a magnifying glass, really focusing in on something, and then you manage some like frosted glass where your mind can wander. So they're two different states, focus and diffused. So for example, we have lots of ideas when we're focused. I'm focused on you now. I'm looking at the camera. I'm looking at the comments and I'm trying to stay focused on that. But my mind is going on in the background, thinking of new ideas and new suggestions and the comments, that. But also, we need to let our mind wander. And we can come up with ideas when our mind's wandering. So, for example, how many ideas do you have when you're in the shower? Or how many ideas do you wake up in the morning because your brain has been processing? In fact, I saw on the internet the other day, you can actually get a notepad that goes in your shower and you can write on the notepad. That's a bit too far for me. I usually just quickly write it down on a sticky note when I get out of the shower. But that's our brain being diffused, coming up with ideas in the shower. Also, if you give yourself time out, it gives you time to focus on the bigger picture. You can take a step back. You can assess where you are. You can look at the bigger picture. You can see if you're on the right track. Allowing you to break focus allows you to be creative as well. So, for example, I talked about that before when all the information's coming into your head. If you keep focusing, you imagine the internet, you keep using up that bandwidth and you have less cognitive capability. So taking a break actually gives you time to regain that capability. And, if you imagine, when your internet breaks down, the first thing you usually do is switch it off and reboot it. And that's what breaks allow us to do. If you continue to push the system, that's when you're not doing yourself any favors. Also, taking breaks and not focusing allows your memory to increase. And we've done some stuff on memory you've seen before on some of the other training I've done. But our memory best works when it goes up and then you have a little break and then it goes up a bit more, goes over a break and it goes up a bit more and goes up like that. So the chart actually does go like that of retaining things rather than a session and you don't come back and revisit it where it sort of goes like that and goes down and you forget. So it's great for retaining memory. And of course, having breaks allows you to cultivate healthy habits. So, for example, walking, getting up, stretching, getting some fresh air, and drinking some water and hydrating. Imagine if every break that you took, with some of the strategies I'm going to talk about in a minute, you took a whole glass of water. That has a great effect on your body and your mind, and the hydration piece. I'm very aware also that what stops people's frustration, what stops people focus is looking constantly at screens. And you might have heard of something called CVS, which is computer vision syndrome. And that's when you've got extended eye strain and you're getting headaches because you're constantly looking at screens. And the recommendation is that if you do work with screens every day, every 20 minutes, you take 20 seconds back and look at something 20 meters in the distance to stop your eyes straining, because we're constantly looking at these screens. So you need 20 minutes out, look at something that's 20 meters away for 20 seconds and a couple of blinks, and then back to what you're doing. And then getting onto the strategies now, because this is Sunday Success Strategies, is now how you can use everything I've just said to become far more productive in your day. So what can we do? And here's some strategies, 5 strategies, which I've been researching for you and looking at to help you stay focused. Strategy number 1 is about using time blocks and using the concept of focused and diffused time, which we talked about earlier. I like to have 30-minute time blocks because that works for me in my diary. In the book 17, Michael talks about 17 time blocks. You have to come up with a number that's good for you. But for me, and I've done this for a long time now, it's easier for me to have 30 time-minute blocks. And I'll explain why in a moment. But the first strategy is about blocking your time, when you're going to focus and when you're going to have that diffused time. So actually think, when are you going to take some time out just to let your mind wander, go for a walk, stare at that thing in the distance? I think it's very useful to put those time blocks into your diary and actually time block them in. If you think about television shows now with adverts, television shows are designed to give your mind a bit of a break and a bit of a mind wander. So basically, you'll be watching a television program and it'll be very, very busy and noisy and etc. And then there'll always be that time to settle down. Same with movies. If we had a movie that was 120 minutes that was constant action, people review those movies poorly because the brain hasn't been given a chance to calm down from the starting credit to the end credit, and it's too much and it's fatigued the brain. So what I would suggest is that you block those times in for number 2. For number 1. Number 2 is look at your task and what you've done in the past and learn from them. So record what you've done in the actual time blocks that you've done. This avoids disappointment and lack of fulfillment, and you don't set yourself up to fail. So in the technique I'm going to tell you about in a moment, I discovered that when I was developing this technique and when I was using it, that hanging the washing on the line took 25 minutes. Now, I know that sounds silly, and why is he talking about washing? But it's a good example, because I had in my head, oh, I'll just nip out and put the washing out. It doesn't take that. It took 25 minutes or so to do the washing. It takes 3 minutes for my kettle to boil. Now, why is that important? Well, because I'm setting myself up to fail if I can think I can do those jobs within 5 minutes or in between my time blocks. So it's very important to get a handle on how long actual things take. And I would always advise you to add a bit more time on. People talk about when they're planning for speeches and talks. So I really do plan for these when I'm talking about it. Okay. When I come and talk, I've got my notes, I prepare. It takes me about 2 hours to get the notes done for what is usually a 15-minute or 20-minute session. Okay. So really do think about how long things take, and also ask yourself the question, when do you work best? Okay. So when do you work best? Do you work best in the morning or the evening or in the break in the day? Really find that spot when you work your best, because many people lose their attention because it's not right for them in their body. I suddenly discovered that actually I can get up quite comfortably early in the morning, and then if I spend an hour doing some work, it's my best focused work. Some people say they can't do that. Some people sleep late and then, or well, whatever late means, they sleep to a certain time, get up in that time. Other people do it at night. Other people are forced to do that because they've got kids and they have to have that spot. But I would suggest you really look, when is the best time for you to focus your work. And it'd be great to see in the chat about people, what's the best time they find their focus work. So let's look at tip number 3. And tip number 3 is about using a framework. And the framework I like to use is something called the Pomodoro Technique. And the Pomodoro Technique is basically using this. This, if you've never seen one of these before, is a timer that you mainly can get them in America, actually. And what they are is they're shaped in a tomato. You can get ones that are shaped in eggs and things. And it's really a cooking timer. And what you do is you twist it and you can set a time and it whizzes round and it bings when it's done. Now, I'm going to set this for 5. No, I'm not actually going to set it because it makes a ticking noise, which I'm not going to do because it'll interfere with the camera. But it's called, it's a tomato. But actually, the technique I'm going to talk about is called the Pomodoro Technique. Pomodoro. Now, what was really interesting in my research for this video today, even though I knew about the Pomodoro Technique, I was watching an online webinar. And the guy that was doing it, firstly, he called it the Pomodoro, which is incorrect. It's the Pomodoro. And he said it was invented by somebody called Mr. Pomodoro. No, it wasn't invented by someone called Mr. Tomato. Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, right? The clue is in this. It was actually invented by someone called Francesco Carello in 1990, around that time. So what is the Pomodoro technique that I use for focusing? So what you basically do, you set a timer for a period of time. Now, for me, what works is 25 minutes. And you have 25 minutes of focus time, and then you have 5 minutes off, or 5 minutes to unfocus, like we talked about earlier. Set the timer, 25 minutes, timer bings, 5 minutes off. Now, other people use that little round box, which is behind me. And if I say, Alexa, set a timer for 25 minutes, she does. Or when I say,
25 minutes.
there you go, she's on. When I say, Siri, set a timer for 25 minutes, that's what I do. No, Siri's not come alive, which is great. But the Alexa's going to go off in 25 minutes. So that's what I do. And then I focus my time and then have the 5 minutes off. So I get up, go for a walk. People are putting in the chat about, staring into the distance, going for walks, not looking at adverts, and having that 5-minute recovery time, which is fantastic. And then you come back and do your work. 25 minutes, 5 minutes, done. 25 minutes, 5 minutes, done. And you can repeat that as long as you've got the time blocking in time, which was number 1. But most people say do 4 of those Pomodoros, and that's what they're called, the Pomodoro time block. Do 4 and then have a longer break. Okay. Now, this is where most people who study this technique go wrong, because they think that's the technique. That's not the technique. The technique is looking at your 25-minute blocks and noting what you've achieved in those 25 blocks to use that for future Pomodoros and timing that out. The other part of the technique, which I like to call the secret sauce, the tomato sauce, if you will. That was a very, very poor joke. I apologize. But the secret sauce for this activity is when you are focused, completely focus on that task that you're doing. And if anything else comes into this head of yours, put it in your 4th brain. I've talked about the 4th brain in another training. Just write it down and then get it out of your head in your 4th brain and come back to that when you have a review Pomodoro at the end of the day. So all you're doing is you're emptying your head onto your pad there. I don't use electronic, I use a pad because it's easy to access. And then I time block a Pomodoro at the end of the day. and then I recover. So the Pomodoro technique, quite simply, is time block 25 minutes, 5 minutes off, and you do a number of those. You record what you do in your time blocks so you know how to time block for the future. You stay focused in your 25 minutes, and then you have your secret sauce, which is basically your pad, and you empty your head. Now, in 17, Michael's book 17, he talks about 17-minute sprints, which I think are absolutely superb. And the way I use 17-minute sprints is for doing jobs around the house, not focus periods. But in the book, Michael talks about 17 because that's the sweet spot for him. That's 17 minutes, and he talks about you can have 3 17 slots in an hour, just like I've talked about the 25 and 5. What I found fascinating with 17 and using the 17 technique, it actually really challenged me to push me more. So it made me start to think, is my 20 minutes too long? But I've stuck with it, and that's what's the most important thing about number 3 is picking a framework, whether it's 17, whether it's Pomodoro's, and stick with that framework and try it out for a couple of weeks and make it a habit rather than just a sort of a technique that you're going to do. Right, folks, we're going to do number 4 now, which is activity stacking. So that's basically bringing things together, all things that can be done at one time in the same place, and put a block of time in so you can do them so your mind doesn't wander. So, for example, it might be some emails, it might be tidying something, it may be preparing something, but, have a list so you can activity stack things together so your mind is not wandering everywhere. Someone has asked me also, how do you plan out big projects? Well, that's a whole nother training about chunking activities and breaking things down. Brian Tracy wrote a great book called Eat That Frog, I think it was called. And he basically said in that book was the best way to break down a project is do the most biggest and ugliest and hardest things first. So he basically said, if somebody asked you to eat eat 2 live frogs, which live frog would you eat first? And he says, to get it out the way, to get it done, and that horrible task, couldn't imagine that, you eat the biggest first. Okay, you tackle the biggest first. But we're not going to get on to talking about live frogs or anything, but it's about, number 4 is about activity stacking, bringing things together so you can do all in one place so your mind's not wandering. And then the last activity is the last part of the framework, or the last strategy is number 5, and number 5 is manage your environment. Get a quiet area. Where I'm recording now, I've closed the window, the door's closed. Some people use busy signs, so some people have hats. You also can get blockers which block things that take your focus away. So, for example, now on Apple, I use an Apple machine. There's now a little block switch in the corner that you can press, that you can put on Do Not Disturb, and it closes down. It closes down any reminders. You also, if you really want to switch off from the world, you can do this. You can take the plug out from your router. And that's what I sometimes do. If I know I've got to focus, I take the internet off, but obviously I'm connected to the internet now. But this is to another computer that I have, which I've pulled out so it doesn't disturb me. So, switch the internet off and use a block time when you're going to catch up on those things. So I try and only answer my emails first thing in the morning, when there's usually not a lot because I've answered them the night before, and I have a rule that I don't send emails after 5 o'clock so it doesn't disturb the other person at the end. I do something called save, not send, and then I look at my emails at the end of my morning. I write down things I've got to do and put them onto my to-do list, my action list, and then I usually do at the end of the day. So I only usually have 3 times to look at email. So my call to action for you guys out there in the brilliant group and 17 groups, and anyone who's watching this and anyone who's watching it when it's recorded later, try one of the techniques that I've just talked about. Put your progress in the chat below and offer any other hints and tips to anyone else that has been watching this, and let's share. The great thing about this group is about sharing and helping other people in what they're doing, and I found loads of great tips from people who've gone through things and been able to manage their time or been able to offer strategies to people. So a reminder of the 5 strategies I've talked about today. Number 1 is use time blocks. Number 2 is assess and record how long things actually take. Number 3 is use a framework, okay, like 17 or like the Pomodoro, and stick with it, and keep trying it and keep doing it. Don't just do it as one day. Try it for a week, 2 weeks. Make sure you eat that frog first. Stay focused, get the biggest thing done, and then manage everything around you in the environment. What I will say is, to stay focused, you really do need to plan. That's my biggest tip with staying focused, is plan, keep consistency, and keep sticking at it. It's not hard to understand those concepts, but it is hard to apply them. So really try them out, keep sticking with them, and stay focused.